Across all 104 seasons of the NFL, there have only been four games in which a team has scored 70 or more points. I'm here to go over each of them. A note before we begin, these are official NFL games in the regular season or postseason. Exhibition or preseason games do not count for a multitude of reasons and would expand that list. For example, in an exhibition game in 1925, the Providence Steamroller won 127 to nothing over West Point Field Artillery. While Providence was a part of the NFL, West Point never was. We'll start with why this video came to fruition. Week 3 of 2023, the 0-2 Denver Broncos traveled to Miami to face off against the 2-0 Dolphins. Some notable players in this game on the Miami Dolphins, they had the following former All-Pro or Pro Bowl players. Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback, Tyreek Hill at wide receiver, Braxton Berrios at wide receiver and return specialist, Teron Armstead at offensive tackle, Bradley Chubb at outside linebacker, Davian Howard at cornerback, Jason Sanders at kicker, Jake Bailey at punter, and Justin Bethel as a defensive back or special teamer. The Denver Broncos had the following former All-Pro or Pro Bowl players: Russell Wilson at quarterback, Courtland Sutton at wide receiver, Garrett Bowles at offensive tackle, Frank Clark at outside linebacker, Patrick Surtain II at cornerback, and Will Lutz at kicker. There were some notable injuries for this game that left out the following players. Dolphins wide receiver Jalen Waddle suffered a concussion, which left him inactive. Dolphins cornerback Jalen Ramsey suffered a torn meniscus before the season. Broncos free safety Justin Simmons had a hip injury, which left him inactive. The Dolphins were coached by Mike McDaniel, while the Broncos were coached by Super Bowl champion head coach Sean Payton. Now onto the game. In the first quarter, Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa threw a 54-yard touchdown to wide receiver Tyreek Hill. The second touchdown comes from Dolphins running back Devon Achane, who ran it in from 8 yards out. Broncos scored their first touchdown when quarterback Russell Wilson threw a 12-yard touchdown to wide receiver Courtland Sutton. At the end of the first quarter, it was 14-7 Dolphins. In the second quarter, Tua Tagovailoa threw a 4-yard touchdown to Devon Achane. Broncos kicker Will Lutz kicked a 31-yard field goal. Dolphins running back Raheem Mostert ran for a 20-yard touchdown. Raheem Mostert then again ran for a touchdown, this time from 3 yards out, and Will Lutz kicked a 25-yard field goal. By the end of the first half, it was 35-13 Dolphins. In the third quarter, Raheem Mostert ran for another touchdown, this time from 1 yard out. Tua Tagovailoa threw a 19-yard touchdown to Raheem Mostert. The Dolphins proceeded to score another touchdown with Raheem Mostert, this time when Tua Tagovailoa threw a 19-yarder to him. By the end of the third quarter, it was 49-13 Dolphins. The first score of the fourth quarter was when Tua Tagovailoa threw a 10-yard touchdown to Devon Achane. Dolphins backups started scoring when backup quarterback Mike White threw a 68-yard touchdown to wide receiver Robbie Chosen. Following the Dolphins' touchdown, Broncos wide receiver Marvin Mims returned the kickoff 99 yards for a touchdown. Devon Achane proceeded to run for a 67-yard touchdown, which would be the final score of the game. The Dolphins ended up winning 70-20. Miami finished with 350 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns on 43 carries. They completed 25 of 28 passes for 376 passing yards and 5 passing touchdowns. On defense, the Dolphins forced 1 interception and recovered 2 fumbles. This was the first time in league history that a team ran for 350 or more yards and threw for 350 or more yards in the same game. Denver finished with 69 rushing yards and 20 carries. They completed 23 of 38 passes for 306 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, and 1 interception. On defense, the Broncos did not force any turnovers. Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert became the second running back duo to ever score 4 touchdowns each in the same game. Achane also joined Billy Cannon as the only players with 200 or more rushing yards, 2 or more rushing touchdowns, and 2 or more receiving touchdowns. The following week, the Dolphins lost to the Buffalo Bills 48-20, while the Broncos won against the Chicago Bears 31-28. At the moment, we are unaware of the potential impact this game or either team will have on the rest of the season. What we do know is the Dolphins' 726 total yards were the second most in a game in league history. The only team with more yards in the game was the 1951 Los Angeles Rams, who had 735. This same game, quarterback Norm Van Brocklin threw a single game record 7 touchdowns. The season prior, Van Brocklin and the Rams were involved in the next game involving a team scoring 70 or more points. Week 6 of 1950, the 0-4 Baltimore Colts traveled to Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum to play the 3-2 Los Angeles Rams. Some background info on the Baltimore Colts. This Colts team has no relation to the Colts franchise we have now. This Colts team started in the All-American Football Conference and joined the San Francisco 49ers and Cleveland Browns, who came over from that league. The expansion Baltimore Colts in 1953 used the same logo, but instead of green and silver, they added their now iconic blue and white. Some notable players in this game: the Los Angeles Rams had the following Hall of Famers: Norm Van Brocklin at quarterback and punter, Bob Waterfield at quarterback, kicker, and punter, Tom Fears as an offensive end, and Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch at offensive end and defensive halfback. Some other 1950 Pro Bowlers and All Pro players: Glenn Davis at offensive halfback, Dick Horner at fullback, Bob Reinhardt at offensive tackle and defensive tackle, Dick Huffman at offensive tackle and defensive tackle, Fred Nametz at center and middle linebacker, Larry Brink at defensive end, and Woodley Lewis at defensive halfback. The Baltimore Colts had the following Hall of Famers: Y.A. Tittle at quarterback, George Blanda at quarterback and kicker, and Art Donovan at defensive tackle. The Colts this year had no Pro Bowlers or All Pro players. The Rams were coached by former Hall of Fame tackle and kicker Joe Steinhauer, while the Colts were coached by Clem Crow. Now on to the game. In the first quarter, Rams halfback Glenn Davis threw a 58-yard touchdown to end Elroy Hirsch. The Colts would answer when quarterback Adrian Burke threw a 55-yard touchdown to halfback Billy Stone. Following the Colts score, Rams halfback Vitamin Smith returned to kick off 95 yards for a touchdown. A few drives later, Rams fullback Dick Horner ran in a 1-yard touchdown. The Colts would answer before the end of the first quarter when Adrian Burke ran in a 1-yard touchdown. The extra point was unsuccessful. So at the end of the first quarter, the Rams were leading 21-13. In the second quarter, Rams fullback Dan Towler ran in a 1-yard touchdown, and Rams quarterback Bob Waterfield ran in a 13-yard touchdown. At the end of the first half, the Rams led 35-13. In the third quarter, Rams quarterback Norm Van Brocklin threw a 33-yard touchdown to end Bob Boyd. Norm Van Brocklin would come back and throw a 36-yard touchdown to end Tom Fears. And the last point scored in the third quarter would come from Adrian Burke, who threw a 25-yard touchdown to halfback Chet Mutrin. At the end of the third quarter, the Rams led 49-20. In the fourth quarter, Rams fullback Ralph Pasquariello ran in a 1-yard touchdown. Bob Waterfield would throw a 5-yard Rams touchdown to Vitamin Smith. Adrian Burke would come in and throw a 15-yard touchdown to Chet Mutrin. And the final score of the game would come from Bob Waterfield throwing a 63-yard touchdown to end Bob Boyd. The final score of this game was the Rams winning 70-27. Los Angeles finished with 188 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns on 36 carries. They completed 17 of 25 passes for 359 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. On defense, the Rams forced 4 interceptions and recovered 2 fumbles. Baltimore finished with 143 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown on 41 carries. They completed 16 of 39 passes for 299 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. On defense, the Colts forced 3 interceptions and recovered 1 fumble. The following week, the Rams won 65-24 over the Detroit Lions, while the Colts lost to the San Francisco 49ers 17-14. This Rams team would set records this season: most points per game in a season with 38.8, most points in a 3-game span with 165, and the most games with 60 or more points in a season with 2. The Los Angeles Rams would finish the regular season 9-3, win a divisional round playoff game against the Chicago Bears, and lose the 1950 championship to the Cleveland Browns. The Baltimore Colts went on to finish the regular season 1-11. The Colts franchise would fold after the season ended. 5 quarterbacks in this game would go on to make more history. 4 quarterbacks, Norm Van Brocklin, Bob Waterfield, George Blanda, and Y.A. Tittle, would all be inducted in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Adrian Burke would lead the league in punt yards twice, passing touchdowns once, and tie the NFL record for 7 touchdowns in a single game. Both Norm Van Brocklin and Bob Waterfield made the Pro Bowl this year, becoming one of 3 times in Pro Bowl history where 2 quarterbacks from the same team made it in the same year. Both Van Brocklin and Waterfield did the same the following year, and Adrian Burke from the Colts would do the same when he was on the Philadelphia Eagles with Bobby Thomason in 1955. When Adrian Burke stopped playing football following the 1956 season, the Eagles drafted a quarterback by the name of Sonny Jurgensen to try and replace Burke. Jurgensen would go on to play in the next game involving a team scoring 70 or more points. Week 12 of 1966, the 1-8-1 New York Giants traveled to Washington, D.C. to play the 5-6 Washington Redskins. 6 weeks prior, the Giants defeated the Redskins 13-10. Going into this week, both teams were eliminated from playoff contention. Some notable players in this game: the Washington Redskins had the following Hall of Famers: Sonny Jurgensen at quarterback, Bobby Mitchell at flanker, Charlie Taylor at halfback and end, Stan Jones at defensive tackle, Chris Hanberger at outside linebacker, Sam Huff at middle linebacker, and Paul Krause at free safety. Some other 1966 Pro Bowlers and All-Pro players for the Redskins were Len House at center and Charlie Gogolak at kicker. This New York Giants team didn't have any Hall of Famers, but they did have some Pro Bowlers or All-Pro players on this team. Greg Larson at center, Jim Katkovich at defensive end, and Spider Lockhart at cornerback. What's interesting about this game is that the kickers of both teams were brothers, Charlie and Pete Gogolak. The Redskins were coached by former Hall of Fame quarterback in Otto Graham, while the Giants were coached by two-time Coach of the Year in Allie Sherman. Now on to the game. In the first quarter, Redskins quarterback Sonny Jurgensen threw a 5-yard touchdown to running back A.D. Whitfield. The extra point was unsuccessful. A.D. Whitfield would score again with a 63-yard rushing touchdown. At the end of the first quarter, it was 13-0 Redskins. In the second quarter, Redskins safety Brig Owens recovered a fumble by Giants quarterback Tom Kennedy and returned it 62 yards for a touchdown. Giants fullback Alan Jacobs ran in a 6-yard touchdown. A.D. Whitfield ran in for a 1-yard touchdown. Redskins halfback Joe Don Looney ran in a 9-yard touchdown. And Giants backup quarterback Gary Wood ran in a 1-yard touchdown. At the end of the first half, it was 34-14 Redskins. In the third quarter, Gary Wood threw a 41-yard touchdown to flanker halfback Joe Morrison. Sonny Jurgensen would throw a 32-yard touchdown to halfback end Charlie Taylor. Gary Wood threw another touchdown, this time from 50 yards out to end Homer Jones. Sonny Jurgensen threw another touchdown of his own, this time from 74 yards to Charlie Taylor. At the end of the third quarter, it was 48-28 Redskins. In the fourth quarter, Redskins cornerback Ricky Harris returned a punt 52 yards for a touchdown. Brig Owens intercepted Gary Wood and returned it 60 yards for a touchdown. Tom Kennedy threw an 18-yard interception to tight end flanker Aaron Thomas. The extra point was unsuccessful. Giants halfback Dan Lewis ran in a 1-yard touchdown. Redskins flanker Bobby Mitchell ran in a 45-yard touchdown. And the final score of the game was when Redskins kicker Charlie Gogolak made a 29-yard field goal. The final score of the game was the Redskins winning 72-41 over the Giants. Washington finished with 209 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns on 24 carries. They completed 10 of 18 passes for 145 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and 1 interception. On defense, the Redskins forced 5 interceptions and recovered 1 fumble. New York finished with 111 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns on 36 carries. They completed 20 of 33 passes for 311 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. On defense, the Giants forced 1 interception and recovered 1 fumble. To this day, this game is the highest scoring NFL game ever, totaling 113 points. This game is one of 5 games to have 100 or more combined points. The next closest is the 106-point affair between the Browns and the Bengals on November 28, 2004. After the game, the Redskins had a bye and defeated the Cowboys 34-31. The Giants lost the week after to the Cleveland Browns 49-40. This game had no impact on the rest of the season. The Washington Redskins would finish 7-7, while the Giants finished 1-12-1. The Giants ended up with the second pick in the draft, which was involved in a trade to acquire future Hall of Fame quarterback Fran Tarkenton. While Redskins owner George Preston Marshall was pleased with the outcome of this game, this next one would likely scar him for the rest of his time as Washington's owner. The 1940 NFL Championship. The 8-3 Chicago Bears traveled to Washington, D.C. to play the 9-2 Washington Redskins. A rematch of the 1937 NFL Championship game, which the Redskins won 28-21. 3 weeks prior, the Redskins defeated the Bears 7-3 in D.C. Redskins owner and Pro Football Hall of Famer George Preston Marshall said after the game, quote, "The Bears are a bunch of crybabies. They're front runners. They can't take defeat. They are a first half club. They're not a second half team. The Bears are quitters." The crybabies line was likely due to Bears Hall of Fame head coach George Halas storming the field after a play and demanding a penalty. Halas used these statements by Marshall as fuel for the team and said, quote, "I hear the Chicago Bears have no guts. It's what they tell me in the newspapers." And Sid Luckman recounted a Halas pregame speech saying, quote, "Gentlemen, this is what Mr. Marshall thinks of you. I know you are the greatest football team in America. I know it, and you know it. I want you to prove that to Mr. Marshall, the Redskins, and above all, the nation." Before the game, Hallis worked with a friend of his in Clark Shaughnessy, who was the University of Stanford coach at the time. Both of them game planned different counters for the Washington defense. The Bears dominated teams during this time with the T formation, but in this game, they took their game to a whole new level. Some notable players in this game on the Chicago Bears side, they had the following Hall of Famers: Sid Luckman at quarterback and safety, George McAfee at halfback and defensive back, Joe Stidahar at offensive tackle, defensive tackle, and kicker, Danny Fortman at offensive guard and defensive tackle, Clyde Bulldog Turner at center and linebacker, and George Musso at offensive guard, offensive tackle, and nose tackle. One more all-pro player from this Bears team was Lee Arto at offensive tackle, and kicker. The Washington Redskins had the following Hall of Famers in Sammy Baugh at quarterback, tailback, defensive back, and punter, Wayne Milner at offensive end and defensive end, and Turk Edwards at offensive tackle and defensive tackle. Some other 1940 All-Pro slash Pro Bowl players include Dick Todd at offensive back, quarterback, linebacker, defensive back, and return specialist. Jim Barber at offensive tackle and defensive tackle, Steve Slavinsky at offensive guard, offensive tackle, and defensive tackle, and finally Willie Wilkin at offensive tackle and defensive tackle. The Redskins were also coached by Hall of Fame head coach Ray Flaherty. This was the first NFL championship game broadcast on the radio nationwide. So now on to the game. In the first quarter, fullback Bill Osmanski ran in a 68-yard touchdown for the Bears. Quarterback Sid Luckman ran in a 1-yard touchdown, and fullback Joe Maniaci ran in for a 42-yard touchdown. The Bears would lead 21 to nothing after the first quarter. There was only one score in the second quarter when Sid Luckman threw a 30-yard touchdown to offensive end Ken Cavanaugh. The Bears led 28 to nothing after one half of play. In the third quarter, defensive end Hampton Poole returned an interception 15 yards for a Bears touchdown. Offensive halfback Ray Nolting ran in for a 23-yard touchdown. The extra point by Dick Plasman was unsuccessful. Defensive back George McAfee returned an interception 34 yards for a touchdown. And linebacker Clyde Bulldog Turner returned an interception 21 yards for a touchdown. And the extra point was unsuccessful by Joe Maniaci. The Bears were up 54 to nothing after three quarters. In the fourth quarter, offensive halfback Harry Clark ran for a 44-yard touchdown. The extra point by Gary Famiglietti was unsuccessful. Fullback Gary Famiglietti would run in for a 2-yard touchdown, and the final points of the game would come from Harry Clark, who ran in a 1-yard touchdown. The extra point by Bob Snyder was unsuccessful. The Bears would win 73 to nothing, the largest shutout win in NFL history, and the most points by a team in a single game. The Bears completed 7 out of 10 passes for 138 yards and one touchdown. They ran the ball 53 times for 381 yards and 7 touchdowns. On defense, Chicago compiled 8 interceptions and 3 were returned for touchdowns. In total, the Chicago Bears had 519 total yards, scored 11 touchdowns, forced 9 turnovers, and had 3 penalties. On the other side, the Redskins completed 20 out of 51 passes for 226 yards and 8 interceptions. They only ran the ball 15 times for 5 yards. Washington did force 1 turnover in a forced fumble. In total, the Washington Redskins had 231 total yards, scored 0 points, forced 1 turnover, and had 8 penalties. The following season, the Chicago Bears headed into the playoffs with a 10-1 record, defeated the Packers in the divisional round, and defeated the Giants in the championship to secure a repeat. The Washington Redskins would fall to 6-5 and miss the playoffs. This game was personal from the start, and the level of continued dominance remains unmatched in the history of the NFL and sports championships. For a long time, I wondered whether or not the NFL would ever have a team get to 70 points. For years, people have said the competition in the NFL is better, and that's why nobody will ever break the 73-point record held by the Bears. But this is just a false narrative. In any game on any given week, a team could score 70 points and we could never predict it. I believe eventually we could see this record be broken and a team eventually score 80 points. For now, 73 points is the mark to beat.